In the autumn of 1932, a young pregnant woman arrived alone at St. Mary's Hospital in rural Virginia. She registered under a false name, avoiding eye contact as nurses noticed her trembling hands and the strange, antiquated dialect in her speech. She looked as if she had stepped out of another century. No one in that hospital could have imagined that the child she carried would become one of the most horrifying medical cases ever recorded. A case so disturbing that an entire family would spend generations trying to erase its existence from history. The baby was born on a freezing November night. From the moment of delivery, doctors knew something was terribly wrong. Sealed medical files kept hidden for more than 60 years and later obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request revealed a genetic profile so extreme that it forced scientists to reconsider the limits of human heredity. This was not ordinary inbreeding. This was the result of relentless, deliberate genetic isolation spanning nearly a century. The newborn lived for exactly 17 minutes, but the tragedy did not begin in that hospital room, nor did it end there. To understand what truly happened, we must travel back almost 200 years to a remote Appalachian valley known only as Devil's Hollow. In 1847, a man named Jacob Holloway fled Pennsylvania with his wife and 7 children. Officially, he was escaping death. Unofficially, court records later revealed he had been accused of unspeakable crimes involving his own daughters. When witnesses suddenly recanted, the case collapsed, but Jacob's reputation was destroyed. Rather than face justice, he vanished into the mountains. Deep in Appalachia, Jacob discovered a hidden valley surrounded by steep rock faces and dense forest, accessible only through a narrow pass. Locals avoided the place, claiming the land felt wrong. Cherokee tribes had long warned that spirits sickened there. Jacob saw something else entirely: absolute isolation, a place where he could rule without interference and bury his secrets forever. After his wife's suspicious death in 1854, Jacob's control became total. He established what he called a natural order. Brothers married sisters. Cousins were paired together. The family's bloodline was deliberately concentrated to keep outsiders away and secrets hidden. The first child born from these unions arrived in 1856, marking the beginning of a genetic catastrophe that would echo across 6 generations. By the 1860s, more than 40 Holloways lived in crude cabins connected by hidden trails. They spoke their own dialect, followed a warped religious doctrine, and avoided all contact with the outside world. Census workers never found them. Tax collectors who came too close never returned. While the Civil War raged beyond the mountains, Devil's Hollow remained untouched and unseen. As generations passed, the consequences of inbreeding became impossible to ignore. Children were born with extra fingers, missing limbs, fused bones, and severe facial deformities. Many could not walk, speak, or even breathe properly. Most died in infancy. Yet instead of seeing these deformities as warnings, the family's leaders believed they were divine signs, proof they were being transformed into something chosen, something beyond human. By 1880, later genetic analysis showed the family's inbreeding coefficient exceeded that of laboratory animals bred specifically for genetic research. Human biology itself was collapsing. In 1912, a girl named Sarah was born into this nightmare. Her genetic makeup was nearly impossible. Her parents shared more than 75% of their DNA, a similarity normally found only in identical twins. Sarah was tiny, malformed, and weak, yet she survived. Against all odds, she lived. She learned to walk late and spoke slowly, but within the twisted confines of Devil's Hollow, she was considered gifted. She could read, she could write, she could think, and that made her dangerous. At 18, Sarah was married to her uncle, a man more than 40 years older than her, whose own genetic damage was extreme. Her first 2 pregnancies ended in horrific miscarriages. The third pregnancy, however, carried to full term. Something inside Sarah changed. In October 1932, during a night filled with the screams of another dying infant, Sarah realized her child would not survive if born in Devil's Hollow. That night she ran. 8 months pregnant, malnourished, and terrified, she crossed miles of wilderness she had never seen before. After 3 days, delirious and feverish, she collapsed near a road where a traveling salesman found her and rushed her to the nearest hospital. She registered under a false name. 3 days later, she went into labor. The delivery was catastrophic. When the infant emerged, the room fell silent. Its skull was elongated and partially collapsed. One arm was missing. The other had 7 fingers. Its legs were fused into a single mass of flesh, containing multiple bone structures. Internally, the organs were malformed beyond recognition. The nervous system was too damaged to support consciousness. A geneticist was called immediately. He would later describe the infant as the most extreme case of genetic compression ever observed. The parents likely shared over 90% of their DNA, nearing the theoretical limit of human reproduction. The child lived for 17 minutes. During those minutes, tissue samples were taken and photographs documented. When the heart finally stopped, everyone present knew they had witnessed the ultimate consequence of generational isolation made flesh. Sarah was told her baby had not survived. She showed no emotion. 3 days later, she vanished from the hospital. 2 weeks after that, her body was found at the bottom of a ravine. Her death was ruled a suicide. For decades, the case remained hidden. The data was too disturbing, too dangerous in an era obsessed with eugenics. But in the 1980s, the geneticist finally broke his silence. His research revealed Devil's Hollow as one of the most extreme genetic bottlenecks ever recorded. A population so damaged that reproduction with outsiders was nearly impossible. When researchers finally located the valley, it was abandoned. Nature had reclaimed it. Scattered across the land were more than 200 graves, most belonging to infants and children who never had a chance. Today, the Holloway case is studied as a warning, a reminder that secrecy, isolation, and unchecked power can corrupt not just morality, but biology itself. The most inbred child ever born lived for only 17 minutes, yet in that brief life, it carried the weight of 6 generations of buried sins, a living testament to the terrible cost of hiding the truth in the shadows. The story, however, did not truly end with the rediscovery of Devil's Hollow. In many ways, that was only the beginning of its final chapter. In the years following the valley's discovery, the remaining traces of the Holloway bloodline became the subject of quiet investigation. State authorities sealed the area permanently, citing structural instability and environmental hazards. Official reports mentioned nothing of genetics, nothing of deformities, and nothing of what had been found in those unmarked graves. To the public, Devil's Hollow became just another forgotten Appalachian ghost site, swallowed by forest and time. Behind closed doors, the truth was treated very differently. Medical institutions across the country requested access to the preserved data collected in 1932. The infant's tissue samples, stored in temperature-controlled archives, became one of the most closely guarded biological records in American history. Advances in genetic sequencing during the late 20th century allowed researchers to finally decode what earlier scientists could only theorize. What they discovered was deeply unsettling. The child's genome showed extreme homozygosity across nearly every chromosome. Mutations that would normally be recessive had stacked, multiplied, and reinforced one another over generations. Entire genetic safeguards had collapsed. The body had not failed randomly. It had followed a predictable path toward biological breakdown once diversity disappeared. More chilling was a realization that emerged decades later. The infant's condition was not the absolute limit. It was simply the last survivable point. Beyond that threshold, life could not form at all. Ethicists reviewing the case argued that Devil's Hollow represented a living experiment in what happens when power, secrecy, and ideology override nature itself. There had been no laboratories, no white coats, no official oversight. Only a family enforcing isolation with religious fervor and violence. Yet the result rivaled the most extreme hypothetical models ever proposed in genetics. Sarah's role in this final chapter became a subject of intense debate. Some researchers viewed her as a victim shaped entirely by biology and environment. Others saw her escape as a moment of extraordinary human clarity, a brief rebellion against a system designed to erase individuality. Her final decision, whether driven by despair or resolve, remained unknowable. What was certain was that she had ended the Holloway bloodline. No verified descendants were ever found. In recent years, Devil's Hollow has resurfaced in academic discussions as a cautionary reference. Genetic counselors cite it when explaining the necessity of diversity. Anthropologists use it to demonstrate how isolation warps culture as much as DNA. And historians point to it as evidence that some of the darkest chapters of human behavior occur far from cities, laws, and witnesses. The unnamed child born in 1932 is still referenced in textbooks under coded designations. No photograph has ever been released to the public. No grave bears its name, yet its existence reshaped how scientists understand genetic limits and reinforced an uncomfortable truth. Biology does not forgive ideology. Isolation leaves scars. Today, hikers sometimes report an unsettling quiet near the region once known as Devil's Hollow. No birds, no insects, just wind moving through empty trees. Whether this silence is coincidence or imagination hardly matters. What matters is what the valley represents. A reminder that when secrecy is protected at all costs, when power goes unquestioned, and when human bonds are twisted into control, the consequences do not fade with time. They echo through generations, written not in stories or records, but in flesh, bone, and broken DNA. And somewhere in the archives of American medicine, a file remains sealed, labeled only with a date from November 1932, containing the final proof that some lines should never be crossed, and some truths, no matter how horrifying, must eventually be faced.